Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Kyle. I am the founder and owner of HireUA, a premium recruiting agency based out of Ukraine. Today I'm going to be talking about 12 of the most common questions I get from business owners in regards to when to hire, how to hire, and of course how to integrate somebody into the team. Question number one, when is the right time to hire? Ideally, it's when you're probably stressed to the limit. So a lot of people will think that they've got like 3 or 4 clients or now is the time to do it. They'll start making like maybe $5,000 a month and they think this is the moment that it's time to hire. And there's kind of a vicious cycle, which means that you get a client, you have to fulfill it, then you stop your outreach, and then you have to start your outreach all over again. It's this vicious little circle. That said, if you're only making, say, $5,000 a month, are you really gonna make a hire for, say, $2,000 a month? Probably not. You also don't wanna be in a position where you go through all the work and the pain and the time and the cost of the hiring aspect. And then on top of that, what happens if you lose a client? If you are going to be dependent on one client or even 2 or 3 clients to bring somebody onto your team, you might really want to ask yourself if it's better just to simply wait until you have an even bigger backlog of clients or customers, whatever it might be. Obviously, it's going to vary from industry to industry. If you're in the agency business and you're constantly needing to acquire new clients, if losing one client is going to mean that you have to lose your employee, it's not worth it. E-commerce or other fields where it's more of a customer service aspect, where you're constantly running ads and you're bringing in customers, not clients, that's going to work a little bit differently. So just keep that in mind. Question number 2, what are the key things to consider when hiring? So I always like to say like what you're bogged down with, 2, what you hate doing, 3, what is time consuming, and 4, what is repetitive. So I always say try to automate it first. There's no human element to that. So if you have tasks that can be automated, you can outsource as much of that as you possibly can. And automation, you don't have to always think of it as fancy Zaps or any fancy software. It can be as simple as building a frequently asked questions database on your website. That's automation. Then you no longer have to answer those questions. Instead, you've got basically a web page that does it for you. Is that going to stop all the inquiries? Of course it's not, but it does help get in the way of some of it. If you can't automate it, then you need to start looking at delegating it. And when it comes to that, I always say, look at what is repetitive. So what I would do is I'd make a column: 1, repetitive; 2, time consuming. Look at all the tasks that get matched up there and see then what you should be actually delegating. And of course, I always say, get rid of the stuff that you don't like doing. How many business owners like doing accounting? How many business owners like doing contracts or paperwork? That's not usually why you got into business, so that you could do those kind of more mundane tasks. All those measure up to something that you should be outsourcing. Finally, the last point on this is that if you find that you have a task that is simply draining you, like you all know what they are, try to get rid of that stuff so you can actually enjoy the stuff that you do in your business, which will ultimately lead to you having more energy, being a happier person, which will ultimately lead more growth in your business. Question number 3, how do you attract the right candidates to a job application? First and foremost, obviously have a good website. People are going to Google you too. It's never been more important, I would say, to have some sort of online presence, a personal brand. But if people have some way to reference who you are and what your company does, that's going to make it a lot easier, as opposed to just posting a job description and just keeping it as some very vague thing. So always put as much information as you can. Make sure you have a good website. If you are active on social media, make sure that's accessible, make sure it looks good, clean it up, and that'll ultimately attract the right people to your candidate pool. The other thing about attracting the right candidates depends on the platforms you're using too. If you're going on Upwork or Fiverr or like online jobs, you're obviously going to have just quite a bit of inbound applicants, and it's going to be up to you to sort them out. You have to determine whether that is worth your time or not. There are other ways around it if that's not the way you want to go, but they are obviously going to be a little bit more expensive in most cases. Question number 4, how do I create a good process to take a high amount of candidates in? So the most obvious one, and I have a video on this, is what I like to call the pineapple pizza theory. You can watch the video right there. And what that basically is, let's say for example, you post a job on like a common job board site. You say like right in the middle of the application, like tell me your favorite candy bar, or some random question right in the middle of the application. Make sure that you know they actually read the whole thing. So that's the first way to actually just filter out the numbers, because when you're getting 300 or 500 applications, you obviously have to filter down a little bit. Otherwise, there's just simply no way that you're going to be able to handle that inbound volume. Question number 5 is how to conduct an effective interview and test so that you ultimately pick the right candidate. What I like to do first and foremost is make sure that you have just a general standard list of questions. And I always recommend that you start off an interview with something personal. What you want to do is break somebody out of their typical interview process. You have to think that candidates who are actively looking for a job have probably been through quite a lot of interviews, and it's very easy for them to also become just bored with the overall process. I know, obviously a candidate who's actively looking for work should be presentable, energetic, and just ready to go. At the same time, you've probably been on a job hunt before and they kind of suck. So give them a break, give them an opportunity to show who they really are, as opposed to the standard interview questions like, what was your last working experience? What did you like about that job? What didn't you like about that job? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Just get rid of all that. Talk to them like a human, not like somebody who's just sitting on the other side of the desk. Remove that barrier and just ask a personal question right off the bat, like, what's something interesting you did this week? Something as simple as that will get somebody to open up a little bit more and show you who they really are, as opposed to just treating it like another boring interview and not showing their real capability. The other strategy I really like to use when hiring is doing a sort of fire drill test, which means that you put somebody in a scenario that they actually are going to do part of the job that you need them to do. It could be something as simple as, hey, here's a recent customer service email we got. How would you respond? And you simply say, write your response right now. You have 60 seconds, whatever it might be, just to see how they handle the pressure, see how they work, see what they can come up with in that time. And that's a really good way to judge someone's character. Number 6, how do you develop a effective compensation package? So in terms of hiring overseas, which is what we do at my agency, HireUA, we only hire people from abroad. It's going to be a lot different because generally speaking, if you are an American company or a British company or any Western company, you're going to be paying somebody a good salary for their region. So if you want to start by building out a good compensation package, the first thing you should do is get an idea of what the average cost of living in their country is. So you can do something as simple as Google, cost of living Ukraine, average salary in Ukraine, whatever it might be, just go and actually search that. It's important to note though that a lot of the data that you're going to get is not necessarily representative or accurate. So what I mean by this is that if you Google average salary in Ukraine, for example, I think the number that comes up now is probably like $400. And obviously there's a whole war going on, things have changed a lot, but let's say it's $400. That average salary of $400 is dragged down by people in small villages, by people who don't speak English, by laborers, whatever else it might be, lower level positions. That number of an average salary is not necessarily reflective of a high level professional who speaks fluent, perfect English. So that $400 is not necessarily going to be accurate. And you should keep that in mind when building the compensation package. The one thing that you can do is to go and find Western companies that happen to be in this country. So for example, you could go and look up what the price is of somebody who's working at the Marriott in Ukraine. But that gives you a rough idea of what you can expect somebody who actually speaks English at a high level to be making. And then of course, in most cases, it's still much lower than what you would pay somebody in the Western world. So even with someone who speaks strong English and has good, just personable skills and could work in a business sense, they're still going to be 70-80% cheaper than it would be to hire somebody who's probably quite mediocre in the United States. The last point on number 6 is that if you have somebody good, pay them an amazing wage for their country, where they are making double, triple, quadruple the average salaries. If you do that, guess what? You're gonna have somebody who's very happy and likely to stick with you for the long term. Number 7, what are some common mistakes that people make when they are hiring a new employee? I think the big one is that people tend to look at only resumes. So I always like to say, most of you probably have a college degree who are watching this, and I would ask you, when's the last time you actually used it? I have an economics degree. I was a computer engineer, now I'm a business owner. So it's not necessarily relevant. That piece of paper does not tell the whole story of a candidate. And oftentimes when we are scheduling interviews with clients, they'll look at a resume and they'll say, this person isn't really the good fit, whatever it might be. And we push back and we will say, like, we've screened this person, we've talked to them, we believe you're a good fit. And a lot of times they'll turn around and after their interviews, they say, oh, you were right. Those 2 candidates I didn't want to interview were actually the 2 best candidates in all of them. It's funny how that works sometimes. So I always say, don't judge a book by its cover, get to actually know somebody. It's only going to take 10 to 15 minutes of your time to get an interview. And more than likely, you're gonna know whether somebody has it within like 2 minutes of talking to them. Question number 8, how do you create a strong company culture that makes people want to stick around? Ask people about themselves. And I talked about this already on the interview process, is get to actually know your employees, ask about their family, get to know something about them, check in with them on a monthly basis, depending on how big your team is. When the HireUA team was only 2 or 3 people, I did one-on-ones almost every week. Then as we got to like 5 or 6 people, it became every other week. And now we're at, a dozen people plus, and it's maybe once a month. But I also have other people that are managing the people below them, so they check in with them more frequently. frequently. So it's always very important that your employees know that you care. It's important that they know that you have their back, and it's also important that they know that they can make mistakes. That's a big thing sometimes with overseas talent, is that cultures are different. So sometimes like mistakes and cover-ups is something that has been very ingrained. Like for example, I always like to say under communist times in the USSR, mistakes were punished. People would lie to their superiors. Everybody was working, for the greater good of the people. The government at the very top would say, you have to meet this quota. So then the managers at the factory, whatever it might be, only had to make up that quota. It didn't matter how bad the products were, it didn't matter how they got there. As long as the number read what it was supposed to, they were fine. Mistakes were punished severely. That's not how business in a capitalist society works. So for example, customer service, it's better to be proactive, not reactive. And sometimes that might mean that your employee makes a mistake and says the wrong thing. So they need to understand that you always have their back and that you will never punish an honest mistake, because they do happen. That is part of business. You've made them, I've made them. That is just the reality of how it is. So always make sure that there is a culture where it's open-minded, where people are willing to learn from their mistakes and learn from their failures and use it as a way to improve. The final thing I'd like to mention about this is just team meetings. When we run our meetings, for example, at HireUA, we always end by just going around the room and saying, hey, do you have a question? Do you have something I can help with? Whatever it might be. Go around the room, give people an opportunity to speak up. And then the final thing that I like to do is also allow the team to run the meetings. So for a long time, I ran all the HireUA meetings. Now we kind of rotate through, where once in a while we'll have somebody else who steps up, they get an agenda, and they actually go and run the meeting. So give people an opportunity to grow, promote people from within when possible, and ultimately try to foster a good growth and good culture in your company. Question number 9, what is the best way to start delegating responsibilities as a business owner? So your time is the most valuable thing, and always use the formula with 1,920 hours. So for example, if your business is making $100,000 a year, your time is worth about $52 an hour. So every decision you make in your business should kind of be based with that in mind. So what you should do is audit your time. This is really important. So in one column, you would basically put that here's your time, here's the activity, and here's the amount of minutes you spent on it. So do that every day for a week and write down every little thing that you do. And at the end of the week, what you should do is you should go through and make 3 colors. Red is a task that you should delegate. So that would be like admin work, invoices, transcribing podcasts, whatever it might be, stuff that is repetitive and time consuming. So make red stuff that you should delegate. Then there's stuff that's kind of right in the middle. So that might be, for example, social media scheduling. Maybe you want your keywords done in a certain way. Maybe you want things going out at a certain time, the descriptions to be just right. It's something that should be delegated, but might be kind of tough to do. So I would put, like, let's for example, say take video editing. Video editing itself, you should be training someone to do, because it's very time consuming and it is pretty repetitive once someone has their style dialed in. After that, scheduling the social media and scheduling those videos, maybe that's something that should be delegated, but maybe there's a certain way you want to do it that's really difficult to train somebody. So put that in yellow. So it's like a stoplight, red, yellow, green. And then green would be stuff that you should do. So in terms of making video, you're a personal brand. Let's say you're a coach or a consultant, and you're the one who is the face of the business. It's going to be very, very hard for you to outsource that. You can't have somebody else behind the camera. It's got to be you. So that would be like a green light. So again, video editing. Red light, doing the actual editing itself. Yellow light, scheduling, doing some of the general admin work around it. Maybe you should delegate it, but maybe you just aren't at that point yet. And then green is obviously filming the content itself. It's going to be extremely difficult. That's probably a good use of your time as a business owner. So again, time, task, and the number of minutes it takes, add it up and see where you're spending your time and how much time you're spending that is a high value task versus time you're spending doing a low value task. Question number 11, how do I provide training and development to my team? So first and foremost, always promote from within. If you see somebody and you hire them for a basic role and they're a rock star, give them an opportunity to move up. There's no reason to wait. Just because someone's only been with you for 3 months doesn't mean they're not capable of doing the job. You don't get rid of the stupid numbers, arbitrary numbers about how long someone should be there. Just focus on the people. If somebody's a customer service rep and 3 months in, they're looking like a rock star that could maybe manage the other customer service reps, give them an opportunity. What's the worst that happens? Maybe you have to demote them back down. More than likely, if they're showing that they have that it factor, they're going to be just fine. They're going to crush it in that next higher role. The next thing is always make sure that opportunities to go get training are available. So anything that will allow someone to do a better job that you're able to fund for that person, give them that block of time, a couple hours a day, or 1 hour a day for a month. They can go and get some individual training on a subject or an area that they would like to improve in, and that's a great way to give your team an opportunity to develop. And the final question I have is, what are some strategies for managing remote team dynamics? So it's tough because when you're hiring overseas, you obviously are never going to meet this person face to face. You only know them through the screen. If there's an opportunity to meet people face to face, I highly recommend you do that. I have not had the pleasure of meeting my entire team at HireUA since the war started. We were obviously all kind of split up across the world. I have met several of them in person, and we are planning a whole team meeting later this year, and it's going to be just a fantastic opportunity. So the last thing though is that nobody likes that meddling middle manager who calls meetings all the time and just sits there and yap. I think we kind of all know who these type of people are. They're very prevalent at the 9 to 5 corporate jobs where people just simply are showing up to the office and trying to get through the day, and maybe they're not actually being productive. Don't be a micromanager. If someone is capable of doing the job that you need them to do in 6 hours a day instead of 8, who cares as long as the job is done? Be flexible, call meetings occasionally, or have just a set couple a week. Go through the meeting notes quickly. Don't waste people's time just sitting there listening to you yammer on about whatever it might be. Try to be concise and quick. Only call meetings if they're important. At the same time, calling them consistently and having a set schedule will certainly get people to open up and get to know their fellow team members, which again, I think is very important given the fact that everybody's working remote in these cases, and everybody needs a little human interaction at their job. I think since everything that happened with COVID, a lot of people have obviously started working at home. I think a lot of big companies are starting to shift that back again, and they're making people come back into the office. It's probably not ideal. Probably the best middle ground would be some sort of hybrid, but big companies don't have that kind of flexibility. So anything you can do to just make the lives and careers of your team better and more enjoyable, do it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed these 12 frequently asked questions that I get about how to hire and build out a team. I hope you found it useful. If you did, make sure that you hit like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more content. If you are a business owner actively looking to make a hire, go to hire-ua.com, book a call with my sales team, and we will run you through the process and let you know how we work. We place premium people from Ukraine for just about any position out there. It'll be 70 to 80% cheaper than you'll find internally in the United States, Canada, UK, whatever it might be. And more than anything, we put some really good people into your business. You'll be paying them a great salary. They'll be motivated to work. Ultimately, we'll be able to help you take your business to new heights. Thank you again for watching. See you in the next video.